Okay, we're all set.
Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to our City Council Finance meeting, February 18th, 2021. I will ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and I did bring our trusty flag that has certainly been weathered over the last year, but it's hanging in there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. I will do a roll call. Councilmember Gully, hopefully, is on his way. Councilmember Ash McPherson.
Present.
Councilmember Steele.
Present.
Councilmember Cummings.
Present.
Councilmember Zaluski.
Here.
Councilmember McDermott.
Here.
And Council President Mantello is here. We have 6 present, 1 absent so far. I would make a motion to approve the minutes of the January finance meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councilmember Zaluski. Seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, we have 6 ayes, no opposition. Presentation of the agenda.
Council President,
Yes.
Jim's having an issue with the link, says it won't let him in.
Okay, Mara will send him a new one. Okay. All right, presentation of the agenda. We have no local laws. We have some ordinances. We do have some resolutions and one big resolution, a county sales tax agreement that the mayor and the county exec are agreeing on. So we'll talk about that after. And Andy will first give us a preliminary 2020 report. Before I hand it over to Andy, I did call Andy earlier and looking it over, Andy, looking over the reports, it's kind of what we anticipated, not as horrible, I think, when we were first discussing it, when COVID-19 first hit us last year, and we knew that revenues would be down. I think all of us worked together, the administration, the city council, bipartisan with Andy, and most importantly, our department heads to try to control expenses. And I think that shows in the expenditures. I did ask Andy, and he's going to touch on the bans and the RANs. And one of the things, Andy, I saw that you provided us last year, and this is, you know, a couple months, because I know that you have a lot going on and you're pretty swamped, but you gave us a really good report on all the bonds and what has been apportioned, what's remaining. If you could update that at some point, and like I said, I know that you're totally swamped, so I don't, you know, expect that soon, but I think it would be really helpful for everyone. And if that's okay.
It is, I can put that together.
Okay, cool. So we'll pass it over to Andy, and I want to thank Andy because he really has been under the gun trying to get these reports done, and I know he's going to take a little bit of a break, and he'll tell you folks that offline, and I'll pass it over to you, Andy. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm going to put my screen up so everyone can see the report. Before I get started, I'm sure you all saw the footnote that's on every single page of the report. These numbers are not final. These numbers are as of February 15th. I will tell you right now, these numbers have changed. They have not changed materially enough to send out a new report, but that's, we're still working through year end and reconciling all the accounts. We have a multitude of dates we have to hit. The first date, March 15th, which is when all receivables need to be done. We are wrapped that up yesterday and today, and move forward. The next big date remains March 1st and March 15th. That's the last date of revenue recognition to book things back. That's an important date, and I'll touch on that specifically in the general fund. What I'm gonna do is I'll go through the major items, and then if there's questions, please ask. All the items that you see in blue, all of them are just about on the revenues for the general fund. Health insurance is highlighted on every expenditure page. These are items that I know for a fact will change prior to year end for varying reasons. So that it was meant to serve as an example of how things will change over the course of the next month and a half. Just to kind of get right into totals. General funds presented the same way that it was during COVID. The 2019 numbers reflect the final actual revenues in each of the respective funds after the audit. As we stand right now, general fund revenues total $64.4 million. That is a decrease of 11%. Again, you can see the multitude of revenues that still need to be recorded. Just under 84% of the budget has been recognized to date. Real property taxes, 97.53% of the budget was achieved in 2020. In looking specifically at city liens and payment paid versus unpaid, 3.66% of bills remained unpaid as of December 31st. In comparing that over the last 5 years, that is tied for the highest unpaid percentage in that time period, although it is within a 0.6% range from low to high. So it's not unreasonable. In my opinion, it's better than I probably anticipated. There was an increase, as we discussed, in escrow payments. I will note that when not going through the foreclosure process in 2020 did impact the unpaid amount because the balance would have been reduced further with the way the accounting process works for foreclosures. That is highlighted in blue because I'm currently reviewing the monetary balances that are outstanding to come up with the final, and I'm also waiting on February collection data to finalize the city's allowance for doubtful accounts. That is something that I have begun discussions with Bonadio on already and finalize that in the beginning of March once I have February collection data. I would rather make the adjustment now as opposed to having them review it during the audit and make an adjustment themselves. Local sources, as we sit here today, is just under $16.5 million. 84.5% of the budget has been recognized. It's a $4.3 million decrease. That is because we are waiting on the fourth quarter amount of sales tax. That we will not receive that amount until March 15th. Remain hopeful that the county fared very well in 2020 in comparison to the rest of the state in regards to sales tax. We are hopeful that trend will continue. The other reason for the decrease, I mentioned this throughout 2020, but just to reiterate it, there was a reclassification of an account from local sources to interfund revenues. So part of the decrease here is $646,000. It's offset. There's a $646,000 increase in the number that's highlighted on my screen currently. I'll touch upon that further once I get to interfund revenues, but that is net neutral to this report.
Hey,
Health, yes.
On the sales tax, I was looking at that last year. It looks like it came in at the 20,700,000 mark. as you stated, the county fared better than other counties, and I believe it was up 13%. Do you anticipate probably we're still going to be short in that arena?
It's really hard to know. Just with the volatility of sales tax, I will note that our share of, so it's not, and everyone's seen the agreement that's on the agenda tonight. We get 80 million, we get 19.65% of the first 80 million countywide. In 2019, the city received 11.1% of the excess over $80 million. In 2020, we received 9% of the excess over $80 million. So there will be a consideration when looking year to year of that percentage change. So we need to see what the amount is and then see what the impact of that will be. There are other factors that we have to see. There's other accounts in local sources too that still need to be tied out. If I'm going to try to finish up pilots tomorrow. We're waiting for the last franchise, not the settlement piece, but the actual collection from Charter. The second installment of that is received at the beginning of March, and we have to book some other receivables for utilities gross receipts tax within that category as well. Local sources really, of all the categories listed, local sources will have the biggest adjustment made to it prior to year end with all of the receivables that need to be recorded.
And Andy, I apologize. Could you also just overall, I should have asked you to do this prior to giving the preliminary report. If we were to receive federal monies, would we be able to put it toward 2020? And if not, what happens going forward in terms of that 2020 deficit? And what would you say the timeline, kind of that cutoff being, should we receive federal monies?
The only way we will recognize any revenue is if it's received prior to March 1st. I think at this point it's unlikely, strongly unlikely that we will see any federal aid before that date. And that remains the same for aid to municipalities. Governor Cuomo at his budget presentation had announced that the state was going to release 15% of the total 20% that had been withheld. We have not received those funds to date. I talked to the state comptroller's office on Tuesday about that. They're still waiting to get more information as to when that will occur. If those funds are not received prior to the end of the month, then we will not be recognizing it in 2020. It then goes into 21, at which point myself, the administration, the council needs to have a conversation. How is that money to be used? Obviously in 21, we have a balanced budget. In most respect, we do have fund balance. That's predicated on the next state budget. But how those funds are to be used, it delves into a much bigger conversation. The cutoff date is the end of the month.
Okay. And just for the record, Councilmember Gully is now with us. Thank you for joining, Jim. I heard you had some technical difficulties. Thank you.
The next category, I just want to note, health. That will have a year-end adjustment for ambulance billing revenues that are received in January and February for transports that occurred prior to December 31st. Public safety, I do want to touch on that because there is a 40% decrease year over year. A significant piece of that, $199,000 of the $292,000 is caused in 2019. There were demolition charges related to Alpha Lanes. So that was a one-time billing, obviously. So the decrease is less than $100,000. The collection of vacant building fees did improve in the fourth quarter itself. I do consider the public safety revenue column to be final. Intergovernmental charges, those still need to have a significant number of receivables recognized within the category itself, which is why only 60% of the budget has been recognized. Use
Sorry,
of, yes,
Council President,
Council
President?
member, yep, Councilmember Cummings.
just going back to that public safety for a second. Looks like we budgeted it to 750. Was that just based on the trend from previous years?
all revenues are based off of prior year trends. So we had anticipated revenues within that category of 700. We had to, there was a revenue shortfall in vacant buildings. But looking at it year to year, it did improve in the fourth quarter. There was a budgetary shortfall, but that budgeted number was based off of historical collections and anticipated collections in 2020.
Okay.
There's no speculative revenues in any of the budgets.
I can obviously look it up, but do you know what we budgeted for 2021 on that?
I do not know that off the top of my head.
Thank you.
And looking back the prior year, Andy, it looked like at this point last year, looking back to 2019, we were about 160K off. So, that's not horrible. The
Right.
300, if you add in alpha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Transportation, $325,000 decrease. That's parking meters. Almost, over 180,000 of the $320,000 change is directly tied to parking meters themselves. There are also decreases in garages and lots. With the impact, the economic impact to downtown, there was a loss of revenue even outside of the meters in the garages and lots, which had been anticipated, and we had discussed that throughout the year. Recreation revenues, you'll see a decrease of 18.5%. There was lost revenue from the lack of summer events. That's where that revenue those revenues are recognized. Along with, as we had discussed throughout the year, a delay in the golf course opening, which year to year lost revenue. All things considered, similar to transportation, just almost 74% of the budgeted revenues were recognized.
And,
Both significantly impacted by the economic impact of the pandemic.
okay. On transportation, I apologize going back. Did the amnesty kick in any money for the parking, or was that not very successful, would you say?
Wasn't successful to the level I think we had hoped. That we did get payments in on it. Given the age of some of them, it was helpful, but materially not to any level that moved it. But I think in a year like 2020, every dollar, even on 76 million, was beneficial. Intergovernmental charges, those still need to be reviewed. A lot of those are receivable, so we'll work through those in the next month. Use of money and property. The city recognizes all activity from the Troy MAC on our accounting records. So that is primarily interest and earnings. The MAC did very well in 2019 on their investments. They are still working on reconciling their books. Generally, we get that information from them again in the middle of March. So that's when everything will be recorded in this category as well. It is unknown at this time what impact that will have on the city in the general fund. Fines and forfeitures, a substantial loss of revenue budgetarily and year over year. That is directly tied to traffic and parking fines. Obviously, traffic with courts being closed and then having minimal dates for hearings and whatnot, that was anticipated. And obviously, not writing the parking tickets, this was anticipated, even to this level throughout the year. Interfund revenues, as I
Uh,
mentioned, yes.
I apologize. Councilmember Cummings, I did look up public safety. It looks like 753 is budgeted
Yeah.
for 2021.
I saw that, and 700 of that is for the vacant buildings. I'm wondering, I know previously there had been more staff on that collection process. Obviously this is a procedural thing, but it seems like it may be, I think it sounds like right now, am I right in understanding that it's just Eric, or there's still support staff on that? Maybe Monica can talk about
Sorry.
staffing in the code department. Is that entirely
So,
on the code department to collect those, or is that shared?
so the code department collects them, but the treasurer's office or the comptroller's office helps bill them.
Okay. And
Is
I
that
guess
what you
how was
mean?
that 700,000 number come to in our budget? If we've been at more
It's-
like 400.
It's
the last 2 years.
it's anticipated 2021, well, in any year, it's the anticipated current year billing plus collection of re-levy revenues for unpaid vacant building fees from the prior year.
Okay. So it's based on what we've billed, but it seems like as compared to most of the things we bill, it seems like payment rates are significantly lower here. Is that a function of staff time, or is that a function of just the kind of bill that it is?
All right, so say that again, the collection.
Yeah, it seems like we're repeatedly budgeting somewhere in the order of $700,000 and getting more like 400,000 or 500,000.
Because
So either our formula is off, or there could be more need for staffing or something else. I don't know what the breakdown there is where we're missing those targets.
So it's based on the number of properties and their aging and such. So it's not necessarily, I think it's probably I actually think it's probably more of a process issue as far as the actual program, a program issue versus a process issue. Because the anticipated revenues would be exactly what we're saying, that what we're projecting. I mean, Belinda does a lot of the back work for us, with Eric itself. Belinda is a big support person to Eric as well, as far as getting all this organized and put together, as far as what the billings are going to be and what the projection is going to be. But a lot of it too is, there's waivers that are applied for, there's those kinds of things. So I think a lot of it is program oriented versus process oriented.
So should we be putting something in the formula to account for waivers, or do you think this is this trend is going to continue? This is a couple years of falling pretty far below. Is that because
I mean, it's certainly something
that's
we
just how
can
the
look
program's
into.
designed, or is that because
Yeah, I mean, it's something we can certainly look into. I know, so Eric does zombie properties most specifically, you know what I
Right.
mean? Like his big work is around zombies, where the vacant building registry is
I know in the
everything.
past we've talked about like a billing person or a paperwork person, an office staff
And
member
code
in code.
enforcement. Yeah, and code
Um,
enforcement.
I know that used to exist, and I'm sure it could be obviously it would be fully paid for by this shortfall if we felt like
Yeah, and
much
that
of this
position,
shortfall could be paid, could be made up with it. But I
yeah,
don't know.
definitely they need more support in this program. But the previous position in code didn't necessarily do support specific to this, because that position was established prior to this program. And to the degree of what we do with it now, especially under the zombie program.
And I
So we can
believe that
certainly look
vacant
into it. I
planning
think there's a lot of,
also helped.
say that again.
And the vacant planning technician also, I think, was involved. Is that
Chris was
Chris?
to some degree, yes, when he was there. But I
so?
think that,
Hopefully that hiring helps too. I don't know.
yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I think it's better supported through code enforcement, because it's a field role as well as an administrative role. And I think we have to figure that part of it out. But I think the other piece of it too is looking at the program as a whole. I think that it just needs to be a little bit revamped somehow, some way,
Sure.
modernized.
All right. Well, eager to help with that. Obviously, very supportive of the concept, and sounds like we've learned a lot in the last maybe a decade since it was, maybe not quite, since it was implemented, that we can build on. So that's good. Thanks.
Interfund revenues. As I mentioned previously, there was a reclassification down from local sources to this category. 81.44% of the budget has been recognized to date. We still need to do reimbursements from CDBG for administrative expenses for the fourth quarter, along with we are working on the administrative draw for the funds that are available to the city through the CARES Act for purchases made related to the pandemic, such as PPE or technology for work from home. So we're working on aggregating those invoices and submitting them for reimbursement. State aid decrease, which is to be expected with the loss of AIM. 80% of the budget has been recognized. Again, we're tying out the smaller state grants that are in there. I don't expect this category to move too much. 80% of the budget will be expended, maybe 81. Obviously, we have the 20% withholding on aid to municipalities. We also had budget in 2020, $1.25 million for a grant from the New York State Financial Restructuring Board. We have been advised that there is a potential that that grant could be withheld at 20%. So 80% of the revenues have been recognized in the current year, just to fall in line with the accounting recognition principles that we're following throughout the general fund when it pertains to this matter. And then the last item I know, intra-fund revenues. That is the water surplus transfer. It is unknown at this time if there will be a transfer, and if there is, how much that will be. That will be predicated, and a decision will be made in April based off of the final numbers in both the general fund and the water fund. Are there any further questions about general fund revenues?
Andy, real quick on the FRB, did we receive any of that money or no?
So the reimbursement request went in the fourth quarter. It's currently being reviewed. We did it in one singular reimbursement,
Okay.
and they are in the process of reviewing it, and we will be reimbursed for that hopefully in the next coming weeks or months.
Okay.
I know the other items in the FRB package of the award are also being currently worked on.
Maybe at a separate meeting, Monica could bring us up to speed on the others, if that worked.
Any other questions about general fund revenues? Moving on to expenses. So where we currently stand today, a decrease in spending of 3.73%, 69.6 million, 90.65% of the total budget has been expended. Permanent salaries, just under $23.4 million. Budgetary savings of 207,000. Please keep in mind that there were a plentiful amount of budget transfers and amendments done throughout the fiscal year to capture savings from this line to either put into the COVID contingency account or to use for other spending purposes in various departments. The next item I wanted to bring up is police overtime. All expenses in Code 1 are, I would say, 98% final. There are some small adjustments that need to be made. Other than that, these numbers will not change much over the next month and a half. Police overtime, 1.45 million, an increase of 190,500 or 15%. It did end up going over budget, 2.68%. We had tried to make sure that all accounts were whole prior to end of year. As we discussed throughout the year, there are 3 causes for that. Multiple vacancies in the department throughout the year. There was a contractual salary increase that was anticipated for budgetarily. Obviously, you would then expect to see a corresponding increase year over year, then various events throughout the year. Fire department overtime, $1.4 million, an increase of $378,000. Did go over budget for just under 5%. I did talk with the chief this evening. There was a salary increase, as we discussed, that occurred mid-year. There were multiple vacancies in the department throughout the year, but the chief did want me to mention one example in particular. There were 7 firefighters hired that went into the academy. Shortly thereafter, 5 more vacancies were created through retirements, which brought the number of vacancies up throughout the fourth quarter to 13. The 7 recruits went into shift in January. The other item of note, because if you look back at the third quarter report and then look at the fourth quarter report, there's a substantial jump in the fire department overtime. A portion of that is what I'm considering to be right sizing, where employees were not able to take vacations to travel, whatnot throughout the 2020 fiscal year. So we saw a lag in what we normally see in the second and third quarters and the beginning of the fourth of overtime because of employees taking time off. And now the jump in the fourth quarter, employees use their accruals, which they're more than able to do. The corresponding cost to that, it was reflective in the fourth quarter. So part of the increase from the third to the fourth quarter, in my eyes, is just a right sizing of what historically has occurred based off of backfilling with overtime for employees taking time off. So there is a factor of that as well that the chief and I discussed this evening about that.
Yeah, I actually highlighted the OT on that, Andy, so I appreciate the update. Now, would we be eligible for any reimbursement? Because I do know that some of that was also COVID related, or?
So if you look in the overtime public safety grant category, it's $404,000. The overtime that's eligible for reimbursement under the grant that the fire department received is classified in that category itself. So that's about $292,000 of overtime within that category is eligible for reimbursement through the FEMA grant that was awarded.
Okay. Do other council members, before we move on, have questions? Okay.
Unless if there's specific questions, there was one category, repairs and rentals. You'll see a substantial decrease year over year. There were significant one-time expenses in 2019 related to the summer storm that occurred in August that were within this category. That's a large part of the change year over year. Generally speaking, in codes 2, 3, and 4, and also related to the COVID contingency account, as the council president mentioned, I am very thankful to all the department heads citywide who were willing to sit down and review their budgets as we did throughout the year. Specifically earlier in the year, in March and April, to be willing to reduce their budgets to the extent that they did, and then also then see savings within the lines. I'm very appreciative of that. In code 8, pension, that is final. That has been recognized in all 4 operating funds. Almost the same amount as the prior year is expended within the general fund. The substantial increase that had been discussed throughout the 2021 budget process will occur in the 2021 fiscal year. And finally, health insurance, a 4.8% decrease year over year, 86.64% has been expended to date. That we did see a significant decrease in usage on the Blue Shield plan earlier in the year due to the pandemic. I will note that where health insurance ends, quite honestly, I have no idea. We are still waiting for health insurance runoffs and payables. Health insurance runoffs are bills that are paid in January and February for claims that were incurred in 2020. That is all provided from Blue Shield. To keep mentioning the date, the earliest we'll receive that information is March 15th. So we wait to see on that. Otherwise, all Code 8 expenses are 98 to 100% final. Just one final review needs to be completed. Are there any other questions about general fund expenses?
Andy, on the general overtime, looking at the third quarter, we were actually 124.85%. So, I mean, we did slightly go down, it looks like, total OT. Is that accurate?
Yes, and then the budgets were all right-sized for every department for overtime in a budget amendment that was done, I believe, I think it was done in December, at December's council meeting,
Yeah.
which is why it is now under budget.
Okay. Could you scroll down quickly? I apologize. Judgments and claims, did that change at all? Okay.
No, that account, I believe that there have been some judgments that have been approved, or some settlements approved by the council in December and January. If those were for incidents, and I believe that they all were, that occurred prior to January 1st, 2021, those will all be recorded as part of year end. So there is some review that needs to be done within that category as well, along with consulting with Corporation Counsel.
Okay. Did anyone have any questions before Andy moves on? At the bottom, I apologize. Can you scroll down to the contingencies? Okay, so you kept that, okay, at the 3 mil.
Are there any other questions? So to the general fund recap, as we sit here, based off of where things were on February 15th, there is a deficit of $5.168 million in the general fund. There is a deficit every year when I give this presentation. As I mentioned throughout, it will change. The tricky part is that I'm sure someone is going to ask, where do I think the year will end? In any other year, I would be able to have some sort of idea. There are a lot of unknowns. Is state aid coming in before February 28th? As I mentioned, the state comptroller's office themselves cannot give an indication of when that date is. What is sales tax going to finish at? What is health insurance going to finish at? And then what are the other adjustments that need to be made as I work through the rest of the reconciliation? I just do not feel comfortable having an idea of if there will be a surplus, if there will be a deficit, or what it would amount to. So I apologize, I just cannot give that answer. What I can say is this is quite honestly better in a lot of ways than I thought it would be. So I do think that there is some hope moving forward. I don't want the council I don't want to say to the council, we will have a surplus or we will have a deficit and then end up in the opposite direction. One of the major benefits, or one of the major positives that we have seen, the $3.3 million revenue anticipation note that was issued in November is still sitting in a bank account and it has not been used once. So, and there was a period of time in December and there was a period of time in January where we thought that we would have to use it and we never did. So that is sitting there. In a perfect world, it will remain sitting there, and we will be able to pay that off, and it will be gone in the fourth quarter of this year.
And that really is kudos to everyone we have talked about. I mean, think about it. If we didn't act in March of last year, and I recall every meeting, I have my notes from every 3 weeks. We were talking on the phone, we were meeting every month, we were making amendments to the budget, the department heads scaled back on expenses. We didn't fill certain positions. No, I mean, it's cautiously optimistic, and we just have to stay the course because we really don't know when we're coming out of this pandemic, obviously.
Does anyone else have any questions about anything pertaining to the general fund? Garbage fund. The only item subject to change in here is state aid. That the 50,000 is an approximation at this time of what will be reimbursed under the DEC grants. My understanding is that the reimbursements are being worked on now. And will be finalized. We'll book a receivable once that has been finalized. Total garbage fund revenues did decrease 9.23% or 413,000, with 93.49% of the budget being recognized. Departmental income did decrease 8%, with 92% of the budget being recognized. That was principally caused in two areas. There was a decrease in revenue from the garbage fee itself. That was caused because of the pandemic when we originally did the bills. In years past, specific exactly to the enhanced STAR exemption, there was an application process that had to be done in order to receive the exemption. What we did was we just exempted all properties that had enhanced STAR. There were more that had enhanced STAR in the past. More people have it that didn't apply for the exemption, as opposed to just, so that was off. There were also an increase in the number of exemptions in areas like vacant buildings and also private collection. When we budget exemptions in the subsequent year budget, so for 2021, all of that has been corrected. So variances of that nature have been anticipated for moving forward in the future. A budgetary, yes.
And Council President,
Yeah, Councilmember Ash McPherson.
Andy, did we send out bills for the garbage collection?
For 21?
Yes,
No, we begin that process at the end of the month.
end of the month. And is it still going to be in 2 installments?
It will still be a two installment with 2 stubs on the bill itself.
Okay, thank you.
We'll start the process at the end of the month. They will be mailed at the end of March.
Okay, thank you.
And Andy, are you seeing a slight downtick in the garbage with folks? I'd be curious, maybe Monica has this answer, not off the top of your head, how many folks are putting in exemptions for 2021? I am at least seeing on social media, and it could be off, that folks are going private. And I'm not sure how that is having an impact on our garbage fund, but maybe at some point, if we could have a number on how many exemption forms have gone in.
Yeah, we can get you something what we have to date, because that will go from generally Chuck's office over to Vicky, because Vicky's got to record them.
Okay, thank you.
The other item of note, interfund transfers, you see a decrease of $107,000 year over year. It's just important to note that 100% of the budget was recognized. So it's just a fluctuation in payment year over year of the cause of the decrease. It was fully recognized within the budget itself. Are there any other questions about garbage fund revenues? Moving on to expenses. Again, health insurance is highlighted for the same reasons as the highlighted the same reasons as the general fund. It will change. Total garbage fund expenses were 4.161 million, an increase of 303,000 or 7.87%. 95.83% of the budget has been recognized. The big increase is in permanent salaries. There was a reclassification of employees in 2020. As you can see, 95.82% of the budget was recognized. Overtime did go over budget. A lot of that was a special, holiday collection, and then split crews during the pandemic in the spring resulted in extra overtime costs attributable to that. The other expense of note I wanted to bring up, there was a $51,000 decrease in tipping fees, almost 5%. Did marginally go over budget. However, the decrease year over year, in a lot of ways, it does correlate to the number of exemptions that you see increase in things such as private collection. So while there is lost revenue, there is an avenue of recouping a piece of that through the corresponding expense account that ties to it. So of the lost revenue, while it does not in any fashion make up for the difference, it is partially offset by the decrease in the tipping fees.
And Andy, I recalled in the third quarter, we had talked about so many folks who were home, and the tipping fees actually went up at that point. So it looks like with maybe some folks going back to work, that it actually took a downturn.
Yes. It's good to see there is a correlation between the revenue and the expense, which had not happened in the third quarter report, as you mentioned. Are there any other questions? If not, the recap of the garbage fund, as we sit here today, there is a $101,000 deficit in the garbage fund itself. Because I know someone will ask, the fund balance at the beginning of the year was $615,000. So there is fund balance that exists that will be able to absorb a deficit. I do anticipate the garbage fund having a deficit at the end of the year. Once what that is, it's too early to know. If I were to guess, it may be around a number of 100, similar to what's being shown on this report. But again, the final amount, we'll have to wait and see, specifically with health insurance.
Council President,
Yep, Councilmember Ash McPherson.
Andy, you're going to anticipate the garbage fund to be in a deficit?
For the 2020 fiscal year, yes.
And what's your reason for that?
The shortfall of revenues.
Would that be the collecting of the payments, or?
More so the exemptions that I had mentioned previously. Revenues in the garbage, water, and sewer funds are all recognized as they are billed. If they are not paid in the fiscal year, they get re-levied under the property taxes, and the general fund writes a check to the corresponding fund to make them whole. So the general fund pays for all garbage fund, water fund, and sewer fund re-levies. And then ideally is the general fund recoups the money through payment of property taxes.
Okay, do you think not having bulk pickup added to this?
Bulk pickup itself was over budget. The primary issue was in the enhanced star and private collection and vacants exemptions in the garbage fee itself.
But we weren't doing any bulk pickup, correct?
we were doing bulk pickup in the violation categories. And if Andy went back to the revenues, you would see where it was actually came in over budget on what we projected versus what we collected. The
Right.
other piece of this too is it's the loss of revenue from the hauler permits. Remember, we had the legislative change that you guys did, and then we ended up not billing because we changed all the fees with the new legislation that you guys passed, adjusting the insurance. You
Right,
had the fair share billing, which didn't get billed until June because of the COVID pandemic issue.
right,
And then
but
you also
my,
have, and then you have Andy's thing. So you lost revenue, so that's why you have the change in you have a negative.
but my question is we weren't doing any bulk pickup other than violation.
Correct, and we
and-
bill for
and-
those.
Right, and I get that, but I'm asking, is there a substantial amount we lost for bulk pickup? Because I know many people wanted bulk pickup and couldn't get bulk pickup because we weren't doing it. And that was what my question was.
According to budget, we were actually over budget on that.
How can we be over budget if we weren't, right, okay, all right.
The
But I'm
way-
just saying,
Okay, we
The way
picked up
the-
more than we budgeted for.
So the way the revenue is recognized for bulk pickup versus garbage violations is the garbage violation fee itself is its own revenue line, and then the a la carte per item fees all go into bulk pickup. Do that because it's easier. Renee and Chuck compare tip fees to revenue. So it's
Right,
easy
but
for
my-
them. So in 2019, total revenue, and I'm just moving back, I'm looking at my calculator. Total revenue split between bulk and
right, but I guess my
violations
point is,
was-
Andy,
I do it, but just, it was in 2019, bulk revenue and violation revenue total combined to be $332,594. In 2020, it was $376,761. So the revenue between bulk and violations increased about 44,000.
but that was just in violations. What I'm saying is there was lost revenue because we weren't doing regular bulk pickup.
Correct, but the revenue was actually made up because we picked up more violations. Budget to budget item to budget item, and account to account. I understand what you're saying, Kim. If we would have collected the other 8 months out of the year, then yes, we
Yeah.
would have had more money, but we did, have the collection from January through March, and then October and November and December, what those last few months of the year. So we did pick up revenue from there as well too. But budget
So-
from account line to account line, we were actually exceeded what we projected.
Okay, so I know this is probably just out there. Are we looking at instituting that back up?
Yeah, we said that once we get out of the winter.
Okay.
I
Okay,
think-
thank you.
I think too, it's important to remember that even if bulk had run, so say it ran in May when crews were on split shifts, there are significant costs that would have been associated with bulk itself. So we would have had the revenue, but we more than likely would have had a further increase in overtime expenses. We would have had more tipping fee expenses associated with the pickups themselves. So I don't want the notion to be there that if the bulk revenue itself would have made a whole, because it's really hard to know if it would have had corresponding expenses along with it.
Right, I don't think it would have made it whole. I just was looking at, how much of a loss or how much we could have brought it closer to. I got it. Thank you.
President,
Nope. Councilmember Cummings.
correct me if I'm wrong. I think this last budget year, the 2020 budget year, a lot of these revenues were based on educated guesses, and the idea was that we would be getting better numbers. So, obviously, unfortunate that it came in lower than the guess, but that's what this process is for. I know we had that buffer of some of the fund balance we built up with the previous years, and I think it's important to be cautious when we're making those guesses when we have that buffer like this, so that we don't overbill people either. It's sort of a gamble when you're rolling out a new program, and I think that's the importance of having a fund balance, is that you can get the real numbers. We can budget with real numbers going forward, but in the meantime, not be accidentally way overbilling people. So I think that was prudent, but looking forward to having the more real numbers going into future years. And I know we already incorporated some of those around fair share into this year's budget. So
All
thank you.
right. Yep. And if you recall, each quarter when we receive the revenues and the expenditures, Andy and the mayor and Monica and everyone, we recognize that we were really in uncharted waters and trying to just stay afloat, not increase that deficit. And I think for the most part, everyone worked very hard to control that.
Absolutely.
Any other questions about garbage fund? Water fund, total revenues, 11.75 million, a decrease of 338,000 or 2.8%. 80% of the budget was recognized. I'm going to start at the bottom and then go up. Appropriated fund balance, that is a fund balance to be used for the 2020 capital plan. Fund balance is not recognized as a revenue itself. So it will be, you'll see it too. We'll talk about it more on the recap sheet. I do show it on the report itself to show that there is I'll put in quotes, revenue offsetting an expense that does exist. City water sales did decrease 1.02% or 41,000, 86.87%. Recognized. Billing was down in the fourth quarter bills. That's the direct cause of that. Outside communities, a decrease of 5.53% or 392,000, 88.25% of the budget was recognized. As we discussed throughout the year, that is directly attributable to Waterford and Half Moon themselves.
Yeah, and I really have to say, when Waterford and Half Moon began to look at that outside line, if you recall, Andy, about 3 years ago, after that main break in North Lansingburg, I mentioned this, and I was told it was not going to have an impact, but it clearly is having an impact on our revenues. How much of the 392 would you say is attributable to that?
All of it.
Really?
Yes. It went from 2.1 million in 19 to 1.65 million in 2020.
Wow. Okay.
Are there any other questions about water revenues?
Well, we may be picking up a new customer with the potential with the line up to, is it Hoosick Falls and potentially Petersburg?
Yes, hopefully. Hopefully that happens. Water fund expenses. A decrease of 14.46% or 1.9 million. That is, as you can see, over $1 million of that is the decrease in the cost of the annual capital plan. Total expenses, as we say here today, 11.38 million. 77% of the budget has been expended. You see various fluctuations throughout the accounts in the water fund themselves. Again, similar to the general fund and the garbage fund. Thank you to Chris and his supervisors for being prudent with their spending throughout the year. Miscellaneous other is the category in which the water surplus transfer would, if it does occur, would be recorded out of, which is why only 49.54% of the budget has been expended to date. You'll see fluctuations in things like consultant services, materials and supplies. Those were based off of expenditures that occurred in the 2019 fiscal year that were one-time events. If there's no questions, I'll move on to the recap. As we sit here today, there is the total change in fund balance is $376,737. That's after the capital plan. Now, the way the water surplus transfer works is you take the operating revenues less the operating expenses. That's the amount that can be transferred from water to general. So based off of that, $1.781 million could be transferred to the general fund. As I said before, if that happens and how much that is, it is unknown to date, but we know what the ceiling on that transfer could be based off of those numbers. Sewer fund.
Sorry, Chair, Council President.
Councilmember Cummings.
I guess two questions. One, is the max that could be transferred out going forward that 1.7, or is it with that 1.7 minus the 1.4 that was already transferred out, and therefore the 370?
Nope, it's operating revenues less operating expenses. So the maximum in 2020 is $1,781,000. It's a year to year. It's based off of current year.
But you don't
operations.
subtract the amount that was already transferred out from that?
The 1.405.
Yeah.
That went to the capital fund for expenditures related directly and only related to the DPU capital plan. It had
So
nothing to do with the
that's
general.
already embedded in the total expenses above,
Correct.
is what you're
It's,
saying? Gotcha.
it's
Yeah,
fine, right.
that makes sense.
But it has absolutely nothing to do with the general fund.
Okay, so why is it subtracted from the total change in fund balance?
Because it's a current year expense that will decrease fund balance. You're using fund, in the 2020 budget, the council approved of using $1,405,000 of water fund balance
Right,
for its capital plan. So it's a current year expense to transfer it to the capital projects fund, but there is no current year operating revenue for that.
right. But so that 1.4 was not included in the 9.9 above in expenses? Is
Correct.
that the idea? It's broken out here?
Correct.
Interesting. Okay. And then how are revenues transferred from the general fund to make it whole recognized in this total revenues line?
It's not, it's a balance sheet transaction. You recognize the bill as it's received. So say
The bills
let me
are
give you an
included in this revenue number? This
The
11 million
revenues-
includes all bills regardless of whether they're collected?
Correct. And if I get a water bill and I don't pay my water bill, the general fund essentially pays my bill for me.
Right.
But
I was
that,
just
if
making
they
sure
do pay the
That
bill
was
for me.
accounted for already in here. That makes sense. Okay. So the transfer from the general fund would not increase or decrease the surplus here. That's a balance sheet thing. It's not a.
Correct. The general fund paying for re-levies has nothing to do with revenues and expenses.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good questions. Anyone else before we move on to sewer? I know
Oh.
everyone's
Yeah. go ahead.
jumping at the bit for the sewer fund.
Sewer fund, similar to water, there was a decrease in city sewer charges of $90,000 or 2.24%. 86% of the budget was recognized. There was a decrease in sewer charges. There is a agreement between the county and the city for sewer line usage within the city that still needs to be recognized in the 2020 fiscal year. That is something that we'll be booking in the next few weeks. As we sit here today, total revenues are $4.25 million, a decrease for now for $138,000 with 86% of the budget recognized. but as I mentioned, we will be booking that payment between the county and the city, the revenue for the agreement between the county and the city in the coming weeks, which should bring up that dollar change column. But to work with Chris on the amount, which I don't know the amount at this time.
Okay, I was just going to ask that, Andy. How much of that is part of the county agreement?
I don't have that with me tonight. I apologize.
It's okay. Monica, are you negotiating that with Rich and them, or is?
Chris was working on it, so I just had to check in on where things stand with it.
The sewer agreement,
Yes.
Correct.
it's one of the things that will be next. We have property tax billing and that one also on the docket. You'll have that soon, I'm sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sewer expenditures. A decrease, total right now, 4.25 million, 86% of the budget expended, a decrease of 3.14%. Fluctuation throughout, one-time purchase of equipment in 2019. Consultant services, as we discussed throughout the year, that was to repair a sewer line within the city. There's costs related for the sinkhole, which is why it went over budget in 2020. So both of those costs are within that category. Otherwise, no material changes in my eyes throughout. Health insurance, similar to all the other funds, will change. Bringing us to the sewer fund recap. The sewer fund has a policy pertaining to the CSO project and annual operations where the transfer to the capital fund for the CSO project cannot create a deficit within the sewer fund. As it currently stands right now, there is not enough operating surplus to cover the full budgeted transfer of $2.204 million, which is what this amount is. So as based off of that policy, all of the current surplus in the sewer fund will be transferred to the capital fund for the CSO project. That is something that has been done every year since the policy was implemented. I think it was passed in either 2017 or 2018.
Yep. Andy, back to the sewer rents. If, that number goes up based on the county, would that go toward that surplus?
It will, yes, and it will go specifically towards that transfer. Any additional, the sewer fund will not, sorry to jump around, there will not be enough revenue or a loss of expenditures to cover the full 2.2 million. So anything sewer fund for 2020 will end the year $0, no surplus, no deficit. Everything else recorded at this point will simply go towards the transfer to the capital fund.
Any questions? Anyone? Okay. Andy, did you want to just end, or the mayor end with on a final note?
Obviously, it's a fluid situation. We keep moving ahead with finishing the reconciliation of all the accounts and get the AUD filed with the state.
Are you on target, you think, Andy? I know, I know the AUD you will be, correct?
I hope to file it on time.
Gotcha.
That's the plan. We're about on target to where I want to be for April 30th. I have to get a couple weeks ahead for personal reasons. Hopefully we get there.
All right. before we get into legislation? Kudos to you and your staff and everyone, department heads, and Monica and the mayor. Has been a true all hands on deck working on the COVID related budget. So hopefully we'll get some federal funding, be in for better times for 2021. But I think it's going to take a while. So. Okay, did anyone, before we get into the legislation, need a potty break, or are we good to go?
Thank you, Andy. Great job. A lot of work.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Andy. No need for a bathroom break.
Very good. Councilmember Gully, did we lose you?
You can't see me there?
No. Oh, there you are. Hello. Good to see you. All right, we'll get into the legislation. No local laws. Ordinance 9, ordinance transferring funds within the 2021 general fund budget. Council President Mantello, at the request of the administration. Do I have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
Motion, Councilmember Zaluski. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Ash McPherson. And I believe Councilmember Ash McPherson had a question on this one.
No, I'm good. I found it.
Oh, okay. I actually did then, if you didn't find it. Mara, I know we're transferring 15 and change to the repairs for the BAS software for the dog licenses. Is the 15 and change the full agreement with this company, or is it more than 1,500?
This is to implement the new module, to add the online module from BAS, and the first year maintenance fee of $360. So going forward, it will be $360 additional every year. This is just for the initial implementation.
Okay.
The 1,200.
Okay.
So
it's
for the
12
first year
plus
total, $1,561, but then after this, it'll be $360 per year.
Okay.
And I just took it out of the permanent salaries line because we did budget for a full-time assistant clerk, but so far the assistant to the clerk is working part-time until we reopen to the public, and so there was savings in that salary line, so I just switched it out of there.
Very good.
President?
When is the company starting?
They said it would take about 2 to 4 weeks total, depending on when they could get us in the docket. So I'm hoping that we would be able to get this done by mid-March, maybe late March at the latest, depending on how it goes.
Sounds good. Can you keep us posted, please?
Council President.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Councilmember Zaluski.
Yes, so obviously we've talked about dog licensing before. We brought in a company to put on a demo. That was Next Pet, and I've also seen the demo of the BAS module, the add-on, and I preferred a more robust solution. Of course, I feel that the Next Pet solution would increase dog licensing substantially in the city of Troy, and we want to get more dogs licensed because it's good for the dogs, it's good for the owners, and it's good for revenues for the city. However, I'm just as happy to support this. It's a step in the right direction, and at least we'll be getting this online, and then moving forward, we can see if this solution will suit our needs or if we can move into something a little more advanced down the road. So I'll be supporting this.
Very good. Further
Council President?
discussion, questions, Councilmember Cummings.
Let's see. All right, the original budget, that 3,800, is that all our annual contract with BAS for the rest of what they do for us?
No, that includes, that's BAS. It includes the copier in the clerk's office. I think that's it. I think it's those two
Do we
items.
pay? So the total, what is the total? I think the council president had started to ask.
Well,
I just wanted
I'm
clarity
sorry, say that
on
again?
what is the total contract with BAS annually? Or existing.
Let me-
You said it, we're going up by a few $100, but the total is all embedded in this.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you. Say that again?
The total is embedded within this budget line. We don't pay them out of another budget line.
No, this is the total, it's classified as repairs on this short budget, but the total thing is repairs, maintenance, and something.
Gotcha.
So the total budget is for all of our software, our copier, you know, things like that. I could send it to you separately. I'd have to pull it up. And then I forget, I sent you the totals. Just give me 1 minute, I can pull this.
Certainly, the relatively affordable
Our total
software.
cost to them is $3,000 a year. I mean, I could give you the exact dollar amount, but it's a little over $3,000 a year.
Okay. Yeah, so certainly
And that's
very
for our
affordable.
total licensing, not just for dogs. That's for everything we do in the city clerk's office, not just for dogs.
Okay, well, good. Thanks for helping move it forward a little bit into the 21st century, getting some of that online. Look forward to continuing to work with you on that. It's nice to have a good, affordable provider. Obviously, I too, doing everything we can to help make things digital and allow constituents to work with these things online. So this is a good stopgap and a very affordable solution, which I think is helpful, especially in these days. And certainly we'll continue to explore programs that are more comprehensive across the board for the city in the future as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Cummings. And, Maura, I know that you've put a lot of time, you and Julia, into really trying to educate folks on the importance of licensing. So let's try to keep that going forward, and anything we can do to move that effort forward, we're with you. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. All right, Ordinance 10, just to apprise everyone, we are going to have to amend the title of this ordinance. The ordinance reads, ordinance amending the general.
Council President?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Did we
We have
vote?
a motion, a second, discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, 7-0. Thank you, Councilmember Zaluski. I was so excited about the amendment. Okay. Ordinance 10, I was surprised. If you look at the backup's correct. We are actually approving the 6F NIP funding for the capital budget, not the general fund and special grants fund budgets. So I am going to make a motion to amend Ordinance 10 to state capital projects fund. So it will state ordinance amending the capital projects fund budget. Correct, Andy?
Correct.
Thank you. So there is a motion on the floor. Maria, you got that okay?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Cool, no problem. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Zaluski, discussion. I am going to once again make my pitch, and Monica has promised me as part of the neighborhood meeting for Old 6th Ave, it will be a combination to talk about Sean's place, a sign or a tree, etc., whatever is going to be put near the park, and also the upgrades to the park. So keep us in the loop on that, Monica. Thank you. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance 10 carries 7-0. Ordinance 11.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, that was on the amendment. You still need to vote on the amended ordinance.
Oh my gosh, okay. On the amended ordinance, I apologize, ordinance 10, we have 7-0 on the amendment. On the amended ordinance, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion, Councilmember Zaluski. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Ash McPherson. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, the amended ordinance 10 passes 7-0. Thank you, Mara. Ordinance 11, ordinance to appropriate funds in the 2021 general fund from the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Violence Against Women Grant as a subrecipient. Council President Mantello, at the request of the administration. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion, Councilmember Ash McPherson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Zaluski. Discussion? I think, bear with me. Yes, I did have a question on this one, and it may have to wait until the regular meeting. I was looking at the backup, and maybe, Mary, you know this answer, but I noticed that Investigator Culinary is actually, this, by the way, is a great program. He actually has an office at the Survivor Services Sanctuary office, I believe. I was just curious, Monica, I'm not sure if you know about this particular office. Where's it located? I was just curious. Okay, Monica's not there. Does the mayor know, or Andy? I don't know if you're aware.
Yeah, I don't actually know where the office is, and I'm not sure we disclose that information, and that may be why it's not included in the backup.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, obviously, this is a super important program, and I noticed that the office is off ground, so I just found that. Okay, thank you. Yep. Questions, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, ordinance 11 carries 7-0. Ordinance 12, ordinance to appropriate funds in the 2021 general fund from the U.S. Department of Justice fiscal year 19 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant. Council President Mantello, at the request of the administration. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion. Oh,
Motion, Councilmember Zaluski. Do I have a second?
second.
Second, Councilmember Ash McPherson. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, ordinance 12 carries 7-0. Ordinance 13, we are going to have to amend this ordinance also. Ordinance 13, ordinance authorizing and directing sales of city-owned real property by the proposal sale application method. Council President Mantello, at the request of the administration, will take a motion in a second and then amend. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion. For now.
Motion, Councilmember Zaluski. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Ash McPherson. We were apprised on one of the property sales that actually had the wrong, let's see, one tax map number 111.52-4-2 14 Man Ave. They have Mr. Brad Lewis as the bidder's name. And I believe the appropriate name is Lewis Contractors. Mara, do you have the?
No, it's 525 Second Street LLC.
Oh, okay. All right, so we have a motion on the floor to amend the tax map number I just mentioned to replace Brad Lewis with 525 Second Street LLC. There's a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second, Councilmember Zaluski on the amendment. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, on the amended ordinance, do I have a motion?
Motion.
Motion, Councilmember Zaluski. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Ash McPherson. Discussion?
President?
Yes, Councilmember Cummings.
I'll just mention the Tyler Street properties. There is a paper street between them. So I would not be surprised if the owner asks us to, I don't know whether we're going to have to act on it or and that's just a procedural thing yeah, probably we will, to alienate that paper street. Maybe he'll be fine with it running through between the two properties, but they're two properties that are adjacent to each other, but for a paper street. There's also lots of paper streets behind it and a property that above the pool that the city, I believe, is taking ownership of in foreclosure. So there's lots of city-owned land around that, but don't be surprised if I don't have anything against this for now, but it's funny to see two divided like that.
Well, let's talk about that because the proposal is Councilmember Cummings to phase new build construction. And I noticed they do have a NYSERDA grant, it appears. And do we know what is proposed on that property?
Just from the proposal, it sounds like a slow phase, starting with a workshop on one of the properties and then a building on the other, I think is what's in the proposal.
Yeah. Well, it's not, it's going, if it does pass to the regular meeting, let's get some answers from Sharon in the meantime. I think that that's important. Okay.
Sure.
Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't think there's any reason for us to hold on to it. It's vacant land on a hill, so having it in someone else's hand is always better than having it in ours. But you know, to the extent we can help encourage the buyer to make good use of it, I would imagine alienation could be appropriate in the future.
Yeah. And I am looking, they have TAP on board and Urban Studio Team. I mean, it sounds like an interesting proposal. There's just not a lot of detail. I would just like to find out a little bit more about it. I'm going to support it, but okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Council President.
Yes, Councilmember Zaluski.
So I just wanted to, first of all, thank the council for, during the last round, we had a little bit of contention for a particular piece of property over on Billings Ave. And this time around, the Boylans did put in their bid, a pretty, I shouldn't say, not bid, proposal. I think it was a good proposal. Very happy to, and I know they are very happy to be being recommended to be awarded the property. I also want to mention that I did correspond with our city assessor, Sharon Martin, because I did promise personally that we would not give up on Mike Toomey either. We do want to find him a good piece of property so he can build a house in the city of Troy. And she said she is still keeping her eyes open for that parcel. So fingers crossed.
Okay. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Ordinance. Shoot.
13.
Thank you. My computer keeps shutting off. Ordinance 13 carries 7-0, and we'll find out a little bit more about Tyler Street. Ordinance 14, ordinance authorizing the city of Troy to accept grant funding from the New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services for infrastructure work on Troy Seawall and amending the capital projects fund budget to appropriate funding from said grant. Council President Mantello, at the request of the administration, do I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Motion, Councilmember Zaluski, do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Ash McPherson. Andy, want to brief us quick on this one? I know it's all good news.
First and foremost, all of the credit for this goes to the deputy mayor for securing the funding. I'll let Monica talk about everything that went into that. Accounting wise, if you go to Schedule A, essentially what we will be doing is taking the $11.4 million paying off all remaining bond anticipation notes associated with the seawall, and then transfer the remaining $3,992,000 to the debt service fund. That will be used specifically to pay off the serial bond that was issued in 2019 related to the seawall. It will cover about 90% or thereof of all outstanding principal and interest costs related to the seawall project. My plan is to take the $3.992 million and spread it out over the life of the remaining life, upon receipt, the remaining life of the debt, to level it out over the remaining years. So there's not fluctuation in the budget going out towards the end of it. And you cannot prepay. You can't. The serial bond is not callable. We can't pay it off now. It has to be in its existence over the life of the term, which I do believe is of 15 years. Is that serial bond? The money can only be used for debt costs related to the seawall, which is why we are doing it this way.
Good job.
Council President? Nope. Looks like it might be frozen.
Yes, Councilman.
Now I don't know what to do. Definitely not.
I think I have to take over now when the council president's incapacitated.
Okay. Did you hear me say what is going on?
No.
Yeah, I think that's the
All
last
of a
we heard from you.
I'm like, Andy froze. It's not me. And then I looked at everyone else and you were all frozen. So.
Good, you missed it.
I had a question.
Yes, question. Sorry, Councilmember Cummings.
Regarding the a little over $3 million spread out over time, are we able to earn interest on that, and to what degree does that compare to the interest we're paying on the bond itself?
It will be in a bank account which earns interest, and it will be, the interest on the debt is more than the interest on the bank account.
So the fact that so we'll lose a little bit by not being able, I mean, obviously we can't pay it down with it, but
Okay. The only thing you can do with this money is, I mean, I'm not trying, I mean, it's phenomenal.
no, I understand.
God, you can't use it for anything other than seawall expenses. The only seawall expenses that are left are the debt costs associated with the seawall expenses. So
Right.
it's going to be used for that purpose. Any interest earned off of it was just simply used to pay down the debt further and avoid reliance on the general fund budget to pay off the debt.
Understood. Just in terms of sort of time value of money spreading out over 50, what is it? Is it 15 years or 35?
I believe the serial bond is 15 years.
So that $3 million over that 3 years, I mean, over those 15 years, it will be worth a lot less in our budget in 15 years than it would be. I understand them from the budgetary practice, but I think it is worth a little discussion of.
So the amortization schedule is locked for the debt. It's X amount for principal and X amount of interest per year. So we're going to set aside money every year to level it. I mean, if you don't do that, you're going to have nothing in the budget for the seawall, for the serial bond debt. And then the year that $3.992 million is gone, you're going to have a spike in the general fund budget to pay the debt back. Or it's
Right.
just simply leveled and you pay the same amount over the remaining life of the debt.
No, I understood why. I understand why from a budgetary standpoint, but from a value standpoint, obviously, if we're not earning much interest on that $3 million, then it's better to spend it now than have it sit in the bank account. But we can debate that. I don't know that we're finalizing that.
You cannot use it. You can't use it to pay a utility bill. You can only use it to pay the
spend down. We could use it to spend down to cover more of our bond payments than 1/15 of them.
But you do understand that it's locked. It's not. There's no
prepay it.
You can't prepay it. It's not callable, and there's no time value of money adjustment in the amortization schedule.
So what is the annual payment after all this is paid down? What is our annual payment on the bond? Do we have a sense of what it'll be? I mean, what's the order of magnitude that we're looking at? That's obviously, it has dropped significantly. Good work. But I'm wondering what's the scale of annual payments for these 15 years? And
The annual payment is 392, well, right around $395,000 annually before the
could-
adjustment for this.
so we could use this federal funding to just pay down the first year of that annual payment rather than spread it out over 15 years in theory.
I cannot call the serial bond.
No, but you have to pay $300,000 to the serial bond next year, right?
Correct.
And you could. Okay, so this 3 million ends up paying most of that, several years of that. Sorry, I got an order mentioned off. So you're saying that this will take down most of that. It sounds like if you spread $3 million over 15 years, that should cover most of those payments.
If we receive the money before August 1st, it will cover all of it, but 1.6 million, call it.
Okay, so that's great. I think that answers my question. It sounds like our annual payments aren't enough to justify causing a spike in year 10. It would take 10 years anyway to spend this down if we were spending it down as fast as we could. So does that make sense?
Are you
So
thinking?
if we're spending,
Yeah, are you?
if we're spending $300,000 a year out of this, it would take 10 years, but we wouldn't be paying anything out of the general fund. Whereas if we spend, $200,000 for 15 years, that still gets to the 3 million. And we have a continuous amount. I think I understand. I think I'm okay with it. I'll let it go for now. I'm getting hand signals.
I certainly don't want to tell FEMA no.
No, very excited about
Just
this.
because you
Very
need to
good job.
figure out the math.
You know what, though?
Understood.
I'm going to suggest that Councilmember Cummings and Andy maybe offline meet.
No, I think I am fully on board. The time value wouldn't be worth much in those last 5 years. It's worth going
Yeah,
for.
I think you're saying like pay it off earlier rather than the 15, pay it off in 10.
Right, we could, but I don't think that's worth. If we could pay it, if we could use all of this in a couple years, then that $3 million is worth a lot more in the first 2 years than it would be in year 15.
Right.
It's not worth that much more in year 10 than it is in year 15. So
Right.
I don't think it's worth messing with the budget to do that. So
Yeah.
Council
Anyway.
President.
Yes, Monica?
So I just want to, it's not all my doing. This is obviously a lot of partnership with the entire team, but also with the Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, because without them advocating for us up to FEMA, that this project was worthy and putting the validation into all the work that we're doing to make sure that it withstood the mitigation aspect of this grant, specific to this grant. So a lot of the credit gets to them as well for carrying the torch for us as a city. And also understanding the magnitude of this project. And we are actually getting another award. This will be the third award for the seawall tomorrow. We created a video, so we'll share the video. CHA actually created the video for it and everything. So it's another engineering award. We've won 2, and then it's also been featured as an education series for the means and methods. So good stuff. And we're happy that we had such a great partnership with everybody.
Good job. Awesome. Honestly, kudos. I mean, it really is a model project. You look at this project, the magnitude working through parts of the winter. CD Perry, huge shout out. Total, public, private, federal, local. It just involves everything, and kudos to the deputy mayor. I know that you oversaw the project, so it really is a true model project for not just the region, but the state.
High five.
Yeah, nice work.
All right. Councilmember Cummings, you sure you're done? No, I'm only kidding.
I'm good.
Further discussion, questions? Ordinance 14, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Ordinance 15, or I apologize. We're done with our ordinances. Resolution 11, resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a memorandum of agreement to share household hazardous waste collection and disposal services with the towns of East Greenbush and Bethlehem. Council President Mantello, at the request of the administration. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Motion, Councilmember Zaluski. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Ash McPherson. And we have Renee with us, who has worked with Rick Morrissey on this wonderful partnership. And maybe you could just delve into, we know what the household hazardous waste collection, but this year, obviously, a little bit of a twist with East Greenbush and Bethlehem. How's that going to change it? And what benefits to the city of Troy does that bring?
Hello. So the way it changes it is it gives our residents 4 opportunities instead of 1 or 2 to be able to register and attend the events. And so the first event will be held in April, and that will be in Bethlehem. Then we'll have one in June in Troy, one in August in East Greenbush, and then the last one in October in Troy. So it gives us, I'm going to call it a larger wingspan, because we're able to capture that many more people that would have to wait until the following year. And I would say that has been the biggest complaint in the past, is there's only been 1 or there's only been 2 and somebody misses it and they haven't heard about it. East Greenbush has really generously offered to host the registration online. And so they have a program called Rec Desk, and that will go live as soon as approval happens. They are ready to pull the trigger on having it will be held as 3 separate events within each event, so that we can keep track of our registrants, and each of the municipalities will only be billed for the number of registrants that they have attend the event. It helps manage expenses in terms of our overall output of costs, the number of laborers and staff that will be there, and also in processing the grant. It will be shared responsibility of the 3 municipalities. We're working really closely with DEC to make sure that that's done very officially, because we're hoping this will be a model program for other municipalities throughout the state.
And, this is such a great program. I already have had a couple of people ask when Troy would be holding theirs. What was the date that you had set for that again, Renee?
Well, so the first one is actually going to be held in Bethlehem, and that is, I believe it's April 17th.
And we'll be able to participate in all 3?
Yeah, all 4. So there's 4, yes. And so I believe the allotment that I had us signed up for was 100 at each of the other 2 events, and then 200 at each of our events, for a total of 600. And so that was our intention last year, was to have had 600 between our 2 events. And so we're just spreading it out more, because we found there was about an 18 to 20% attrition rate. And so what would happen toward the end is we would start making phone calls and saying, are you absolutely going? Are you not going? Are you sure? Are you not sure? So we try and pull other people in that were on wait list. But what still ended up happening, which was very strange, because people had to submit their ID and everything, was there were still no-shows. And so what we'll be able to do much more efficiently this time is also track no-shows, so that if somebody has had a no-show at the first event, then the second event, they'll get a reminder, if you don't show up for this event, you would be put on a wait list for the next event. And so I think it allows us to manage that much more closely as well.
Yeah, I like having the 4 events. That's pretty awesome. Did they expand the material accepted also? It looks a little larger than the past, or no?
No, actually, that's a very good question. They specified out, they had more categories or less categories before. And so they had lumped things together. And so now it's kind of expanded out so that there's individual materials that are more explicitly defined. And the other thing that we're going to be doing differently this year is we're going to separate out, the other 2 municipalities have ongoing electronic programs because they're funded in a different way. And so we want to have a standalone electronics event, because what was happening was there were household hazardous waste coupons that were being utilized by people who are only dropping off electronics. And so there's not really any benefit to having that wed to that event. And so we're separating that out this time for the first time. And in the beginning of May, we'll be holding a distribution for the composters and rain barrels, of which that sale has just gone live, and we're going to start the PR for that. So we'll do shredding, electronic waste, and the composter and rain barrel delivery in May. That way it also spreads out the number of people. So that also acts as a COVID precaution, and it allows us to establish a new event.
Okay.
Council President?
Yes, we'll go to Councilmember Ash McPherson, then Councilmember Cummings. Thanks, Renee.
Hi, Renee. I just want to stick on what's on our agenda. If I'm looking at this, these items that they're saying that they can bring to these either April Bethlehem or any of them, when I'm looking at the list, these are all the items that they can get rid of, the hazard. Why does it only have, like, the vendor has the dots? The vendor's the only one that's going to accept those things, and then the host has got a dot? I didn't understand. If you look at the sheets.
Yeah. Which page?
I'm on page 7 of the
Appendix.
the waste products. Yeah.
Yeah. I think what they're saying that the host.
That's why I'm asking Renee. Let Renee answer.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm with you. It's a good question.
Sorry, all my documents are bound together here, so it'll just take me a second to get.
That's
to that.
okay. The way I'm reading this, I'm assuming that these are all hazardous waste programs, hazardous waste, and they can go to whatever Bethlehem or whatever, but I just didn't understand, like, some of them acetone and adhesives, you have dots under the vendors, but then you have the host municipality is going to take batteries and acid batteries and things like that. I was just kind of confused.
Oh, yes, I still haven't gotten to the right page, but now I understand what you're asking. So the municipalities can take and handle and manage those materials because they're not handled as hazardous. Actually, some of the batteries can create revenue for the municipalities. And so the idea of putting it in there is to reflect the fact that there would be a savings recognized by the municipality, the host municipality, for processing those materials independently.
So these dots mean, I mean, any of this stuff can go to any of these hazard waste programs that you're doing. If I'm going to Bethlehem on April 17th, I could take anything on any of these lists.
Yep.
Doesn't matter. Okay.
Correct.
I just didn't understand what the dots were.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, so that was the brainchild of one of my colleagues in one of the other municipalities. And I really like that it delineated out those materials that would cost us less to process outside of them being handled as hazardous. The reason that they specified is because they're piggybacking on our contract. Our contract allows for handling of these materials. And so them separating this out says we don't have to collect those materials via MXI, and MXI agreed to have us be able to separate them out, if that makes sense.
I just want to make sure people are going to take the stuff there and they're not going to be turned away.
No, not at
Okay.
all. No,
Okay.
at the contrary, meaning they would just be handled by the municipality instead of having a cost associated with it of handling it with MXI.
Okay. So it's an internal dot thing. It's an internal dot thing.
Yes, yes, it is.
Council
Thank you.
President,
First, Councilmember Cummings, and then Councilmember Gully.
Yeah, looking at those, start with jumping off from those dots. Looks like a lot of those things are things that can generally just be collected in totally other ways as well. So fine that we can collect them there. But I was wondering if the website, both for that and for the electronic waste you were talking about, will have some good education about that. Maybe also about latex paints, the thing people don't actually need to get a voucher for. I don't know if it's a direct linking people to our new app, if that's up and running, or what. Just to
It's not yet.
well, by the time this is going, is what I'm
So-
saying. How do we encourage folks? I know that's been an effort of yours for the last few years. Is how do we get the word out on if you're just getting a voucher to get rid of your propane tank, you can do that in another way. You don't need to take up a voucher for that. example.
So
Or certainly battery.
I guess there was a series of questions being asked there, so I'm going to try and hit
Yeah.
them one at a time. So in terms of managing and handling it, and in terms of how we're going to publicize it, we are currently strategizing on what the outreach campaigns are going to be, because what we're looking at doing is kind of branding it. So I'll reveal to you, even though it's not public yet, we're calling it the Best Bet, which is Bethlehem, East Greenbush, Troy. And we're going to roll it out as an extension from, it'll go directly from the link page into the registration pages for East Greenbush, but on the landing page that people will use, it'll explain whether you're from whichever municipality, this is how it's going to go. And on that site, it will explain and detail the information that you're talking about. And so what we'll be able to do, hopefully, as soon as we go live, which we're hoping in a fairly short period of time for Recollect, we'll be able to add that much more depth and a robust value of that to any of the planning that we're doing for any of our events. So in terms of education and outreach, we're going to utilize as many resources as possible, and it's going to be consistent messaging across the board, and it will be branding that utilizes what do you call it? The logos from each of the municipalities. Does that answer your questions?
Councilmember Cummings.
Yes. Broadly, I think yes. I guess certainly at first, I imagine you'll do that, but sounds like you can probably also link from Recollect to the registration site, which will be helpful for folks.
Yes. Yeah. So we will cross, what do you call it? Correlate, connect,
yep.
Across platforms as soon as we're able. It's just what we're trying to do, and my colleagues in the other municipalities have all agreed, we don't want to put any carts before any horses, and so really building it before they come, we want to make sure that we're doing it in a manner that is manageable and sustainable. That's why we're kind of taking baby steps into it in terms of how much we advertise, because this is the first time East Greenbush has had a household hazardous, and Bethlehem didn't have one last year, and they are keeping their numbers even lower than we are. So we want to make sure
they'll be capped as well. That it's not like they'll take up
right.
our slots.
Everybody has individual caps, and so what will happen is if it hits the cap for that municipality, somebody will automatically go on a wait list, and it will tell them that they've gone on a wait list, and then they would have first option on the next event, regardless of which municipality it's held at.
Okay, that makes sense. And then, yeah, I guess on the registration form itself, I understand that there's a pro and con on making it more complicated versus not. but I couldn't. I know a lot of people probably just skip over a lot of the details. So having a question on there saying like, if you only have latex paint or batteries or those sort of things, you
Yes,
can bring them, but it'd be nice to put that really in the registration form
It is.
itself so that you're
it's there.
discouraging vouchers
It
from being
says
used nowadays.
what materials are you bringing? And so that is a requirement for them to complete the registration,
Okay.
to list as many of them as possible. Also on there is a requirement of an upload of a utility bill and a driver's license or some other
I was
sort of
gonna ask.
ID. If somebody doesn't have the capability to do that, then they would call and we'll do it the good old fashioned way as we've done in the past. And there is additionally a requirement for a driver's license number, or I'm sorry, a license plate number, which that's what Bethlehem does, and a tax map ID. So that way we have enough cross references that I can then go to Laura, who's my go-to person on it. Laura Amos knows every single address you could possibly ever know, because we've had people that have tried to sign up that actually only pay school taxes, but not city taxes. And
Sure, people in Brunswick,
that's
yeah.
how we actually had one person register and pay the $109 or $110 the one time because they were from outside the municipality, and none of the 3 municipalities want to be opening it to outside of those.
Okay. So people are gonna have to look up their tax IDs if they don't know them on the city. on the
There's
county
actually, there
county
will
website.
be a link on there sending them to Rensselaer County's website so that they don't
Okay.
have to do anything other than press a button, go to the site and put in their address.
Okay. Yeah, that site's kind of annoying because it acts like you need a login, but you don't. So flag that for
Right.
folks as well.
Yep.
And then, yeah, I guess for folks who do want to sign up in person, if we get City Hall open to some degree before this program ends, will there be capability for folks to come up in person and have you sign them in the back end?
Generally speaking, what we did at the during the beginning of the pandemic, because we did have an event during the pandemic last year, was I walked them through the registration process and had them mail me a copy of it. There were two folks that didn't have, and I had people text me pictures of their driver's license or whatever.
Sure.
There were two people that were quite elderly that didn't have the capability of doing that didn't have a copier. And so I talked to Chuck and we exempted them from the requirement of having to have a copy of it. You know, they assured me, and one of them Laura knew, so I was very comfortable with that. But we're not averse to hand holding through the process. We're just trying to streamline it as much as possible.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Good to obviously, I'm always an advocate for things being online, but good to see that we have backups as well. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Gully.
My question got answered. Thank you.
You're welcome. Nice hat. Further discussion, questions. I did want to add that our Corporation Counsel, he did initially have a potential concern with the insurance, but we did receive an email at 5:15, and I want to thank Rick Morrissey for that. The insurance is their certificate of insurance, policy endorsement, etc. And I want to thank Rick for staying on top of that. So thank you. Moving along, further questions, discussion.
Council President.
Councilmember.
Sorry, I do have one last question.
Sure.
I was really good to see the collaboration with adjacent municipalities. Do you see this as a model to continue to expand the number of municipalities involved, or is this sort of a sweet spot in terms of, could we end up with a regional scale thing where there's one happening all the time and you can go anywhere, or is that too much to manage and we're better off with that?
Well, it's an interesting question, and it's not one that we have not discussed. We have discussed that, in fact. I feel like with something of this magnitude, to almost have a 3 municipality as a pilot and then expand from it. From my understanding, 10 to 15 years ago, there was a model that was used that was a much larger intermunicipal model. but it was also long before there were as many problems out there, as many risks, as much liability. And that actually was, it was engineered by the town of Bethlehem. A woman who's now deceased, Sharon Fisher, had spearheaded that. And Dan was familiar with the whole process. And so when we first started discussing this, we talked about building it up over time. There are a couple concerns we've got with that. So as not to burden council, but give you at least a highlight of what our concerns are. We are adjacent to two different planning units, one in Rensselaer County and one in Albany County that reaches across into Rensselaer. We need to be careful about doing stuff that is outside of that with their own municipalities. Bethlehem was able to separate out enough from that to be able to participate. So it depends on which municipalities are involved so that we don't really tick off lead municipalities that are parts of those planning units. So we'll have to be very strategic about it, but I'm certainly not averse to growing it once we really have our feet underneath us and we're comfortable with the process and the protocol.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and it's horrible. I have one last question. I'm very sorry. I did want to ask, I know we're getting a 50% grant from DEC for this. Renee, what's our total cut on the cost of this? I did not see it in the agreement, but I could be missing it.
It doesn't specify because it varies from event to event, because the weights of the materials are far different from event to event. I can say that I would anticipate, largely being able to stay. We have it budgeted. I want to say about 30, I think 33 or 35 of what we have aside in the contractor service or consultant services is committed toward this. And so that will cover, in my opinion, what we would take in the 4 events based on what has happened historically. So I guess the best answer I can give you is I would guess that our portion of it is going to be less than $35,000. But I don't know because we don't know what the materials are going to be. I think that it really helped that during the midst of the pandemic, we had a number, we had 260 some odd people at the last event. So that diverted a good amount of stuff of ours. The other 2 municipalities, I think, are going to come in with heavier weights. That's why we separated it out by the number of attendees, and each of us are registering our own attendees, so it will help in that aspect.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
No problem. And I noticed the company's out of Virginia.
Yes. They have Virginia facility and they have a Pennsylvania facility. And I am so grateful for council's support of us going with them because the other company, Tredebi, was associated with Norlite, and we all know what's going on over there right now. And then for the fact of support in the first place, moving away from CARE, I really think it's putting us in a good place with making sure we're dealing with vendors that are handling materials responsibly.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. Thank you. Further discussion on resolution 11? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? This resolution, to get it moving forward, will be a special meeting immediately following the finance. Resolution 12, resolution appointing commissioners of deeds for the city of Troy, Council President Mantello. I would like to make a motion to amend this resolution. First, we'll get a motion, second, then I'll amend. I have to add a person. Do we have a motion on resolution 12?
Motion.
Thank you, Councilmember Zaluski. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Gully. Discussion? Okay, all in favor, or actually I'll amend it now that we have a motion and a second. Sorry about that. I have to add a person, and I am pleased to add Kimberly Ash McPherson as a Commissioner of Deed. So I will make a motion to amend Reso to add Kimberly Ash McPherson. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Councilmember Zaluski on the amended resolution. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Motion, Councilmember Zaluski. Do I have a second?
I'm sorry, you didn't vote on the amendment.
Oh, we did. Okay. On the amendment to add Kimberly Ash McPherson, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain,
Opposed?
abstain.
Okay, you can abstain. Opposed? Okay, we have 6-0-1, one recusal on the amended resolution, Resolution 12. Do I have a motion on the amended?
Motion.
Thank you, Councilmember Zaluski. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Gully. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Abstain, abstain.
And one abstain. Thank you. So there's 601 on Resolution 12. Resolution 13, resolution reporting the standard workday for certain elected and appointed employees. Council President Mantello. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Motion, Councilmember Zaluski. Do I have a second?
Second,
Second, Councilmember Ash McPherson. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Resolution 13 carries 7-0. Resolution 14, resolution proclaiming March 2021 as Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month in the city of Troy. Council President Mantello, Councilmember Ash McPherson, Councilmember Zaluski, and I do believe that Councilmember McDermott did send an email asking to go on that resolution.
And Councilmember Steele as well. I received those after the agenda went out.
Perfect. Councilmember Steele also. So it looks like Councilmember Cummings, Councilmember Gully, would you like to join?
put him right on the spot.
A lot of
Yeah.
peer pressure.
I thought I sent the email in, but maybe I didn't. Who knows? I'll
No
have to look.
problem. You could put us all on, Mara. So resolution 14, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion. I wasn't going to motion, but now that we're all on it.
Motion, Councilmember Zaluski. Do I have a second?
Second,
Second, Councilmember Ash McPherson. I'll hold this resolution for the March meeting. Further discussion? It's very near and dear to my heart. All in favor?
Aye.
aye,
Aye. Opposed? All right, resolution 14, 7-0. Resolution 15, resolution proclaiming March 2021 as Women's History Month in the city of Troy. Council President Mantello, Councilmember Ash McPherson, Councilmember Zaluski, Councilmember Steele, Councilmember McDermott. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion, Councilmember Zaluski. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second, Councilmember Ash McPherson. We do have Kathy Sheehan from the Historical Society who will join us in March to talk about the women's history here in the city of Troy. So we'll hold that one, reading it, et cetera, unless somebody else wanted to ask a question, discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Resolution 15 carries 7-0. Resolution 16, resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Rensselaer County and the city of Rensselaer to allocate and distribute local sales and use tax revenue. Council President Mantello, at the request of the administration, do I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Motion, Councilmember Zaluski. Do I have a second?
Second,
Second, Councilmember Ash McPherson. I don't know if Monica or Andy want to take the lead on this, but basically, my biggest thing, what has changed from the prior to this one? And obviously, I think this one said it expires 2027. Is it 2027? And maybe if you could just talk about the allocation and distribution. And the preemption, sorry. Thanks.
So this is the difference, and I'll let Andy talk about the distributions and all of that kind of stuff, but this is essentially the same agreement we had last year. We just extended it and carried it forward. The previous agreement had a sliding scale downwards. We obviously did not want to continue a sliding scale downwards, but we also see we have an amazing benefit in our county where we're actually seeing an increase in sales tax, as we just discussed earlier in the meeting. So we felt that this was fair. It's also, also keep in mind that it's our county sales tax as well too. So we still have county taxes. So it's going to balance itself out. So if the county has money or versus the city has money. That being said, so this is the same agreement. We kept it at the 9% with the same 19.65 for the first 80 million. And then after that, nothing really else has changed. We did do a preemption in here. What we found when we looked through the agreement and after a little bit of looking into the sales tax law was that we did a preemption. Remember when we were doing the hotel tax and the occupancy tax? That actually falls under sales and use tax, where most people wouldn't necessarily think of that as a sales and use tax. That's how it's actually labeled under New York state law. So we actually made sure to add that in there, whether it's us that decides to do it down the road or somebody down the future, down past us. We just wanted to make sure that that was in there because it does necessarily fall under the sales and use tax law. So other than that, really nothing has changed. The distributions are still the same. They do include Rensselaer. Rensselaer has been included in all of the agreements over the past, I'm going to say 3 agreements that we have on hand. But other than that, that's it.
Okay.
Hasn't really changed much at all. That was kind of the nature of the agreement with the county.
Okay. Andy, you had mentioned earlier the 11%. Was that prior or was that?
That was the 2000, our fiscal year 2019 allocation of the excess. So it slid from 11.1 from 19 to 9% in 2020. It slid even more in previous years.
Okay.
Financially speaking, to get rid of the slide is beneficial to the city, and lock in the straight formula over the life of the agreement. I think it's a fair and equitable allocation. The other big thing is the deputy mayor mentioned is the ability at some point, if there's a desire to pursue the occupancy tax, which would obviously then bring in additional revenue to the city. But it's as the deputy mayor mentioned, it's a status quo agreement, 19.65 plus the 9.
Yeah, and I believe though the occupancy tax has to go toward tourism, education, and things like that. Correct? If it
you have to designate something for it. You can't just have it dump into the general fund. You have to have a designation.
Yep. Okay, cool. Further questions?
Council President.
Yes, Councilmember Zaluski.
Probably, I'm guessing that we won't get an answer to this tonight, but I was just curious if anyone knows, what's the breakdown in terms of tax revenue between the taxes generated in the city of Troy as part of Rensselaer County and the taxes generated outside of the city of Troy? In other words, do the towns generate the heavier part of our taxes, or is it the city? And I'm thinking, for example, like Walmart is in Brunswick, right? It's not in Troy, and that's probably a big tax generator. I'm just wondering what the breakdown is.
I don't know the exact breakdown. I don't know, Andy. I don't know if Andy has talked to the state about it. It's not something that's readily available, and it's not distributed to us in that form or fashion. But if you think about our population centers, while we are a third of the population, we're the buyer, and the sales tax is actually generated outside of the city of Troy, a bulk of the sales tax. But also keep in mind too that we are on the second or third year of actually internet sales as well too. I would imagine that was probably a bulk of why our sales were pretty good. Our sales tax was pretty good this past year. We must have a lot of Amazon shoppers in the county. But I think that's, you need to keep that in mind too, that we're also seeing that revenue as well. Now we're realizing that revenue from internet sales.
Okay.
It's a
Thanks.
good point. You know what, Councilmember Zaluski, you may be able to get that number from the county. I bet you they have that.
Okay.
We can see if we can find it. It's something we've requested before and I don't think we've gotten it, but we can certainly try again.
Thank you.
Okay, further discussion, questions? I had to plug my computer in. I thought I had enough power. Nope. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, Councilmember Cummings, I didn't hear your vote, but.
Huh.
Okay, you can do up or down or,
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
all right.
Yes, he's in. He's in.
Okay, he's in. Resolution 16 carries 7-0. Okay, now at this point, I will take a motion to adjourn. We only have one item
Motion.
special, and we could get through that quickly, I think, without a break. So a motion to adjourn. We have Councilmember Ash McPherson. Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion on the motion to adjourn.
Council President.
Yes.
Oh, geez.
Councilmember
Can you hear me now?
He's on a roll.
I won't,
Okay.
I won't discuss more since we already voted, but I will say I too would like to see the work on how we get to this number, this 19%. It's a relatively long contract, and I think I don't think just this is how it's been. If there's any data at all on how much of the sales tax is driven by the city versus the surrounding area, I think that's important for us to be able to vote on this next week. So getting some of those stats from the county and the state, we can talk more offline, but I'd like to see some of those before we vote on this.
Sure. And we have 2 weeks from tonight. So, all right. So hopefully, Andy, you and Monica can get more information on that. We do have a motion. We have a second. All in favor of adjourning and going into the special. Don't go anywhere.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, 7-0 to adjourn. And if okay, we'll go right into the special.
Yeah, I'll just point out that, Council President, you were definitely more lenient than I would have been if I was president. I would have found Councilman Cummings out of order.
I figured because it was a finance meeting, I would kind of keep it cool. So yeah, I'm being nice, Councilmember Cummings, but no. All right. How about we go into our special meeting? It is 8:23. We're about an hour and 23 over, but that's okay. And I would ask everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, and maybe Councilmember Gully, we haven't heard too much from you, can lead us in the pledge, please. Councilmember Gully?
You have to let me get it on mute.
Sorry.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Gully. We'll do roll call, Mara.
Councilmember Gully,
I am here.
Councilmember Ash McPherson,
Still here.
Councilmember Steele,
Present.
Councilmember Cummings,
Present.
Councilmember Zaluski,
Hanging on.
Councilmember McDermott,
Here.
Council President Mantello.
I'm here.
7 present, none absent.
The presentation of the agenda, we have one resolution, which was talked about extensively earlier. No one has signed up for the public forum. We'll go right into local laws, none, ordinances, none, resolution 11.
Resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a memorandum of agreement to share household hazardous waste collection and disposal services with the towns of East Greenbush and Bethlehem. Council President Mantello at the request of the administration.
Do I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Motion, Councilmember Zaluski, do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Gully. He beat you to the punch, Councilmember. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Resolution 11 passes 7 ayes, 0 noes.
Before we adjourn, I just want to remind folks that at the March meeting, the legislative address will be given. I have talked to Mara and Quinn, and I plan to do it live from council chambers. I'll be alone, and we'll Zoom from there. Okay, and that'll be right at 7 o'clock. And any other housekeeping before we adjourn? Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion, Councilmember Zaluski, do we have a second?
Absolutely.
Second, Councilmember Gully, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, good night, everyone. Thank you, Andy, Monica, Mayor, Mara, Renee. Good night, Rick.
Good night. Thank